to the many watching all over the world, Suriname, St. Lucia, Holland, France. I welcome you to this service with these words. My mother, Clemence Louise Douglas, was a special lady. And if you're wondering why I'm wearing blue, it's because I said to her many years ago, Mother, at your funeral, I will be wearing blue, your favorite color. I have kept that promise. This morning at 5 o'clock, my phone rang. It was from a gentleman called George Kenton. George Kenton, remember the name. And he said to me, JD, with George by your side, you are not alone. Amen. Thank you, George. My mother, Clemence Louise Douglas, and her mother, Mrs. Paffertine Wells, had a few things in common. Both gave birth to 8 children. Both had 6 girls. Both had 2 boys. Both had their first 3 children in St. Lucia and then immigrated to another country. In Paffertine Wells' case, she emigrated to Cayenne. In my mother's case, she went to Curacao, and both had 5 children in the new land that they moved to. Both had kids who died. Age 2, my mother was taken to St. Lucia by a relative, so she never grew up with the rest of her siblings in Cayenne. She met my father, Henry MacDonald Douglas, and they emigrated to Curacao. And on the 22nd of January, 1949, they were married. In the book, How to Make Friends and Influence People, you are taught, describe a person the way they would like to be talked about themselves. So what can I say about my mother? She was a devout Catholic who never missed one single Mass, and the only Mass she missed was 2 years ago when she was taken from her home to London. And when she came back and I said, how was it, Mother? She said, it was fine, son, but I didn't go to Mass. She missed it. She loved the Pope. And when she waited for the Pope to come to England for many years and the Pope didn't come, when the Pope went to St. Lucia, she jumped on a plane and she went to St. Lucia to see the Pope. And years later, when the Pope came to Coventry, she would tell everybody with a smile on her face, I've seen the Pope. That was my mother. She gave endlessly, she gave selflessly. That was my mother. She was known as Granny. She was known as Mum, Mother. But above all, she was always a godmother to the many. She loved to christen children. And I remember one day, I was in the bull ring with her many years ago, and there were 2 ladies I didn't recognize. And I said to her, Mom, that lady by the bus stop, who is she? And she said, I christened her child. And I said, the other lady in the shoe shop, who is she? I christened her child as well. There was a catch. If you wanted my mother to christen your child, it had to be at St. Patrick's. She would always say to you, leave it with me. I will talk to the priest. That was my mother. I want to tell you 3 principles of my mother believed in. The acts and action of my mother always had principles. In St. Lucia, my mother worked at the St. Lucia Beach Hotel. And every day she would take home from the kitchen the untouched bacon, sausage, boiled egg, croissant, and toast. And she would take it home, and the children would gather around of the neighbors, and my mother would feed those hungry children. And one day, my mother came home. She put her bag down. She opened it, and she paid the big wrapper, and she left the house. And I followed her. I wondered where she was going. And up the hill, under a tree, there were 5 children and their mother. They had stowed away from Venezuela. Their hair was dirty, dirt, and their nose was snotty. Their clothes were torn. And my mother opened that basket and she fed those children she had never set eyes on before in her entire life. And I remember when she asked the mother, "What's your name?" And she said, "Maria." And the woman cried when she saw the way my mother fed her children that she didn't know. My mother came to England and she would go to London. And before she left, she would make bakes, fish cakes, and bread. And she would take that to London. And when she came out of Victoria Station, she would feed those in need, those without homes. And after she fed them, she would break the bread and feed the birds. That was my mother. My mother believed in the principle, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. I learned that from my mother. Another principle I learned from my mother is this. While she was feeding those children from Venezuela who had dirt in their hair, who slept all rough, she decided one day to invite them to my sister's birthday party. And I said, "No, mother, no, don't." And I begged her whole day, "Please, mother, don't bring those children in the house, they're too dirty." And you know what? My mother invited them to the home. And the day of the birthday party, I walked out. I didn't want to be around. And I was praying that my mother would come under the tree and give me something to eat. And first hour went, second hour, third hour, 4 hours. For 4 hours, I stayed under that mango tree, and my mother never came out. You know why? If I was going to be a selfless, selfish child, I needed to be taught a lesson for life. And the lesson is this. My mother never believed that any of her children or grandchildren had any position, privilege, or rights over anybody she had brought into the family. Never forget that. No grandchild, no great-grandchild had any privilege, rights, or position over anybody she had brought into the family. That was my mother. Amen. My mother in Birmingham used to organize coach trips for those who couldn't afford holidays abroad. She would do that endlessly. And the message was this: look no more, we are the ones we have been waiting for. A native North American prayer. She believed in that. That is why she organized those trips endlessly. My mother was the greatest. And Muhammad Ali was once asked, "How would you like to be remembered?" And Ali said, "I don't want to be remembered because I was the first man to win the world heavyweight title 3 times. I don't want to be remembered because I'm the prettiest. I want to be remembered by the ordinary people who I helped and the changes that I made in their life." That's how Muhammad Ali wanted to be remembered. And that, my friend, is the best epitaph of my mother, that she's remembered by the changes she made in the lives of ordinary people. Thank you.